Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this celebration of 50 years now, 50 years plus of cooperation in the geosciences that the EuroGeoSurveys represents. It truly is an honor, and I, as with my previous speakers, extend my congratulations to our colleagues for that achievement. It is, I want to acknowledge the organizers for putting together a wonderful agenda. I have learned so much from all of the speakers that we've heard. I do certainly appreciate Steve Hill's acknowledgement that geoscientists are awesome. And that was wonderful to hear that. But also what he said about the importance of building trust and being able to, if we want to, in the words of the previous speaker just now, if we want to really see that science being put to use, we have to build those relationships with the community, whether it is at a local scale, regional scale, or indeed at a global scale is so important. And of course, it was very meaningful to be here, and if we think about the scale of the challenges we're facing, and to hear from our colleague from Ukraine, there's nothing you could make that more real than your presentation. So thank you for that. As we look at the decades ahead, we realize that we have a tremendous opportunity to build on the many advances of the past with a revitalized workforce that is more reflective of the diversity of lived experiences in the nations that we all serve. By building diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, what the sequence of words we refer to, we call it DEIA, and I know there are many variants on that. By building that into the fabric of our organizations, we'll be better positioned to serve all the communities that need the science that we do and that we produce. And that, I think, is a challenge that we can all embrace. From the standpoint of the U.S. Geological Survey, we feel that we will be stronger and most effective when we have a diverse range of expertise and experiences, perspectives, and backgrounds that better reflect our nation. And that means we need to be able to better recruit and retain a skilled and high-performing workforce, attracting candidates from every segment of our society. So let's see if I make things, there we go. So as the nation's water, earth, and biological science and civilian mapping agency, the USGS has a responsibility to deliver science that reflects and responds to society's ever-evolving needs. And as we saw the example of the Canadian example, those needs have shifted over the decades to even centuries in which the geological surveys have been operating. But those needs truly have never been greater. The span of environmental, resource, and public safety issues that society must address, and that geological surveys have so much to contribute to. In 2010, our then director, Marcia McNutt, decided that it made more sense to organize the USGS around missions, what we do for society, rather than necessarily what people got their degree in, the various ologies that make up the USGS. And so it is that we identify ourselves in terms of these societal mission areas, whether it's addressing water resources, natural hazards, geologic resources, and ecosystems. And we are a somewhat unusual geological survey in that we also have absorbed, back in the mid-90s, we absorbed the National Biological Survey. So we are bringing this sort of wide range of different disciplines to bear on these complex problems. And then our core science systems mission is about all of those foundational capabilities and data sets that underpin every single one of those societal areas. So things like the geologic mapping that we heard about earlier in the previous part of this session, topographic mapping, in our case, the abilities associated with remote sensing, as well as high performance computing. All of these are capabilities that underpin what we do and what we're trying to achieve with this mission. And really our mission statement, our vision statement is all about delivering our science to decision makers in the most effective manner that we can. All of our mission areas are focused on delivering science that matters, what we call actionable information. We strive to bring our science to bear on a broadly varied set of societal challenges with information that's useful, relevant, and actionable for decision makers, for planners, and the public. And to this, I would add a further challenge to deliver it to those who need it the most, including underserved communities, and to do so in a form that they can use. This is a big priority for me as we seek to ensure that we have outlets for all of the wonderful science that's going on, that it can be then translated. And this is, as we think about the many different types of disciplines, the many types of expertise, many types of relationships and partnerships that it takes to actually be able to deliver it in a form that is going to be especially useful. And I think geological surveys, there's a term now, people talk about boundary organizations, and I think geological surveys very much have always been in that role of being in that translational between whether the research activities and those who must put it to work. So a key focus for the USGS today is in bringing our science to bear on what the current Biden-Harris administration calls the 4 converging crises. This is controlling the pandemic, promoting racial equity, tackling climate change, and rebuilding the economy with a particular emphasis on infrastructure. And the USGS brings its full range of science to bear on all of these issues. I mentioned we have the biological capabilities, that includes wildlife health, and these questions around the relationship of the pandemic, can it move back and forth to those reservoirs? In terms of infrastructure, of course, we know all of the foundational data that is required to be able to build out and to build better requires tremendous amounts of geoscience data and information. And then when it comes to climate change, the incredible range of science that it can be brought to bear, whether it's in terms of mitigation or in terms of adaptation. We have a responsibility to be able to bring all of that together in order to support decision making. And when it comes to equity, we're seeking to take advantage of alignment and of support and interest from the top of the government, but to bring that with the tremendous amount of energy that we see across all of our science centers to change the way that we have operated, to really change the face of the science that we do. So we're currently putting the finishing touches on a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility strategic plan for the USGS that outlines our approach to addressing gaps in our workforce, fostering improvements in our workplace, ensuring our work addresses the science information needs of and outcomes of underserved communities, and assuring leadership, accountability, and transparency. The goals are designed to ensure that the USGS works collaboratively with our partners and stakeholders to drive innovation and organizational outcomes, draw from the full diversity of the nation, and position us to serve as a model employer that values and promotes equity for all of our colleagues in an inclusive and civil workplace environment. Within the USGS, DEIA activities have generated bureau-wide interest and enthusiasm. This includes participation in employee resource groups and other diversity-focused committees and working groups across the Bureau, and establishment of an annual grassroots symposium. One of the ways that we have tried to sort of bring these sort of values together is through an updated version of our guiding principles. We're a very far-flung organization. We have 68 science centers, 400 locations across the country. So to be able to create a sense of shared values, shared mission is a challenge. It's something that we work on all the time. The guiding principles have been one of the ways that we do that. And again, this grassroots symposium that brought together individuals with interest and passion in this from across the organization was very helpful in approaching this and really sort of updating how we think about and communicate what we are all about. Now, as we heard earlier, I think all the geological surveys face challenges in terms of cultivating the next generation of survey scientists. And for us, that means if we're going to meet that challenge, we've got to be able to reach underserved communities and again, to have a workforce that looks more like the nation that we serve. We're engaged in multiple levels to develop and retain a next generation workforce that is more diverse. With many of our science centers are co-located with universities or have university ties, so we have an opportunity to tap into those connections and expertise to try to better build the pipeline for the future in a way that builds diversity and taps into different lived experiences. And I'll say there was a recent article just a couple of years ago in the American Geophysical Union's magazine EOS, which actually said, pipeline isn't really the right term for this. Closer is a braided river. As we think about the different ways that people's careers evolve, as we think of the different experiences that sort of enable people to come in and become part of a workforce, become part of an industry or an endeavor. And so as a result, if we're going to make progress in this arena, we have to be approaching this from many different levels, many different ways. So everything from engagement at the elementary up through what we call elementary through high school level, the primary and secondary grades, to engagement at the universities, as I mentioned, and then of course finally to be able to have the opportunities to bring those that new workforce into the survey. And one of the ways we've always had strong partnerships with a number of institutions that are largely drawing from minority communities. And so we've been trying to build on that experience, both in terms of underserved communities, as well as in particularly trying to build our relationships and our partnerships with Native American and tribal communities. So the USGS is the science agency for what's called the Department of the Interior. We sit within the entity that is responsible for managing something like 20% of all of the lands in the United States, the National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, the Fish and Wildlife Service. It is also the department that has the responsibility to American Indian and Alaska Native people. And indeed, the current Secretary of the Interior, so my boss, is the first Native American to serve in that role. And earlier this year, she spoke to the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and described what she called an obligation to the future. How every government, country, and community can learn from the Indigenous people's worldview so that we manage our lands, waters, and resources, not just across years, but across generations. And that really is the essence of sustainability. In her speech, she emphasized the need for enhanced participation and meaningful engagement of Indigenous peoples. So in the case of the USGS, that engagement takes a number of forms. Of course, we have a requirement to sort of formally engage when we have projects that have a substantial potential impact on Native American lands or communities, engage in formal government-to-government consultation. But much more important is to actually build partnerships that we have both with tribes as well as with tribal colleges and universities. These include technical assistance on natural hazard mitigation, climate change, water resources, and ecosystem preservation, as well as developing science education opportunities that incorporate traditional ecological and geological knowledge. The Indigenous Observation Network is a collaboration between the USGS and Indigenous Yukon River Basin communities in Alaska and Canada. It started as a community-based water quality monitoring program driven by concerns around historic military and mining waste, and a desire to drink water from the river as our ancestors did before us. It's become the largest indigenous international monitoring network in the world. Likewise, the USGS has developed tribal resilience liaison programs aimed at engaging Alaska Native communities to better inform our science priorities and to support co-production of knowledge. And with Pacific Island communities, they of course face a number of unique sustainability challenges associated with a warming planet and sea level rise. So we worked with them on collaborative topographic and bathymetric mapping, vulnerability in coastal infrastructure issues, clean water, and identifying locations for coral reef and climate resilience. Geoscientists work on temporal and spatial scales that often seem far removed from daily life. Yet the processes and phenomena that we study directly affect the quality of life, whether it's in terms of availability of resources, environmental habitability, and public safety. Our science can contribute greatly to a highly important societal decision-making, but applying such contributions is challenging and requires a concerted effort to bridge the gap between those who are generating the science and those who put it to work. This requires a commitment to engage in what we call participatory research, where we're actively collaborating with a full range of partners in the design, execution, and delivery of our science. This allows the consumers of the scientific products to participate in identifying the need for the data and framing the research questions, maximizing the applicability and functionality of the results. So in our annual guidance out to our science centers, we have encouraged them to increase the participatory nature of the research, that is to embrace and move forward towards more collaborative and inclusive production of actionable science that then enables partners to take appropriate and timely action. The bottom line is that we want our science put to work. We have a number of project-specific successes in this area, but we know that we can do much more to put equity at the center of our work. And we must do this not simply because it's the right thing to do, but also because it has the potential to vastly expand the kinds of science and knowledge that we produce, and ensure that those communities receive their fair share of the positive impacts that science can provide. A good example of this is the work that we've done in Puerto Rico following Hurricane Maria. When Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico in 2017, as well as a number of other Caribbean nations, it triggered more than 70,000 landslides across the island, disrupting transportation routes, dislodging homes, and causing both direct and indirect loss of life. In the wake of the hurricane, community leaders and decision makers in Puerto Rico reached out to the USGS for assistance. In response, we worked with the University of Puerto Rico Mayagüez and the University of Colorado Boulder to develop scientific products like the landslide susceptibility map shown on the left, as well as municipal level susceptibility maps. But in addition, we developed a suite of layperson-friendly outreach and educational materials on landslide hazards. This was jointly prepared with the community to complement the technical materials that we were developing on landslides. And the goal of these collaborations and projects was to highlight the need to support the education of residents and emergency managers about the landslide risk and to help communities become more resilient. These products were developed in Spanish first and then translated back to English in order to ensure the broadest possible readership. Environmental justice is an important aspect of the racial equity priority for the administration. And for the USGS, we see our role as providing more effective delivery of our science. We see this as an opportunity to be able to be able to more effectively engage with communities, as well as to ensure that the kinds of information that they need are in fact even being produced in the first place. So we see this again, it's an opportunity for us to improve our science, but also to build capacity, and especially as the earlier comment, to build trust in with these communities to ensure that this is going to be both useful and used. We have tremendous data sets and expertise to offer. We're currently celebrating our 50th anniversary celebration is the 50th anniversary celebration of Landsat. This is a partnership that we have had now for decades with NASA NASA launches the satellite. They just launched Landsat 9 last September. And then once they've shaken it down, made sure everything's working, then they hand over the keys and the USGS flies it and handles all of the data distribution then for what we hope will be decades. And in the case of Landsat 5, it was 35 years, but we can't count on that. But the incredible range of applications. Indeed, this week, the PCORA conference is taking place in Denver, where people are hearing about the depth and breadth of applications of this kind of moderate resolution land imaging. And again, not just in the over distance, but over time, whether it's food security, global deforestation, water monitoring, or other applications. An example of this, working with tribal communities in Arizona, vegetation types such as ponderosa pine forests, pinyon juniper woodlands, and grasslands have important ecological, cultural, and economic value for the tribe. This is a value that extends beyond the tribal lands and across the western US. Yet vegetation in this region is being severely stressed by drought conditions, in some cases unprecedented drought conditions, and the resulting fluctuations in water availability. Landsat data are used to produce a detailed vegetation map that the tribe is then able to use in combination with high-resolution LiDAR data to be able to estimate biomass and assess fire burn severity. This becomes a cost-efficient way for them to be able to monitor vegetation condition and to help inform land management decisions. Some of the most societally important contributions that we in the geosciences can make relate to water resources. The critical issue is indeed in the Western US is drought, especially challenging for tribal communities. Nikki Tooley is an extraordinary individual who's been an important bridge builder. She comes from the Navajo Nation, is currently doing her doctoral research at the University of Arizona. And she uses Landsat and other remote sensing technology to help the Navajo Nation develop capacity, train, and build trust of remote sensing data. This then supports their drought water management decision-making process. So literally every day, this remote sensing data is providing essential information that helps land managers and policymakers make decisions about resources and the environment. But that only happens if we have the translators and we are putting the data into forms that can be used as decision support tools. I'd also like to acknowledge this is an issue that we're looking at not only from a domestic standpoint, but also in terms of our global partnerships. Next week, I'll be heading to Ghana, to Accra, for the first in-person plenary meeting of the Group on Earth Observations since 2019. Should sound familiar. The meeting is going to showcase how global collaboration is accelerating the use of Earth observations as evidence for local impact, both in Africa and around the world. And the USGS has been very involved in the equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts for GEO. And also in working to develop a Geo-Indigenous Alliance to support those activities. And I'll close with one of the most, what I feel is one of our most successful efforts to forge partnerships that enable us to deliver science to those who need it most in a form that they can use. And that's the USGS Volcano Disaster Assistance Program that for 35 years we have been doing in concert with the U.S. Agency for International Development. The focus is on Latin America, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific Basin, with the goal of supporting foreign volcano observatories so that they can help save lives and reduce losses. Through donations, training, and special projects, we build capacity, knowledge, and experience that extends beyond our partners to impact society and institutions in the places we work. During crises, VDAP stands behind its partners, helping where needed, but ensuring that the partners are acknowledged as the experts and thereby strengthening their long-term ability to provide disaster risk reduction. So our focus is on communications, protocols, and organization, recognizing that the science we do, the monitoring and the research, is only the beginning when it comes to successful disaster risk reduction. So with that, I'll just close saying that equity goals are central to our stated aims to deliver our science to those who need it the most. The USGS is committed to research and information delivery that addresses the needs of underserved communities, including tribal communities, The USGS has a long history of rich partnerships that increase the value of our science to society. I look forward to strengthening our partnerships with those gathered here so that we may learn from one another and achieve our shared goals of a more just and equitable future. With that, I will again wish a happy 50th anniversary and thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this.